competition policy, which is the next area in which the negotiations are ongoing. What is competition policy? It aims at promoting fair and healthy competition. It ensures efficient market outcomes and expanded opportunities for economic growth and trade. Traditionally, competition policy was national in its scope and restricted to domestic markets. However, as a result of MNC activities, meaning the activities of multinational corporations, which obviously are crossing borders, anti-competitive behavior has taken a cross-border dimension. The spread of MNCs has also been boosted by the spread of regional and global value chains as we know them. So the fact that anti-competitive behavior has taken a cross-border dimension requires a regional or international approach to competition policy. So competition policy can no longer be restricted to the domestic context. The AfCFTA can serve as a vehicle to address cross-border competition issues through a continental competition framework. And that is what the negotiations seek to achieve. In terms of competition regimes, much like for investment, we see a smorgasbord of competition regimes across the continent. You have 23 countries with competition regimes enforced by a competition authority. There are 10 countries that have competition law, but no competition authority as such. You have 4 countries at advanced stages of preparing competition legislation. You have 17 countries with no competition law at all. So huge variations. And you have similar variations at the level of the regional economic communities as well. COMESA and the EAC, for example, have set up a supranational regional competition authority. Others, for example, SADC, operate through a cooperation framework. So we see huge variation in terms of what has been achieved on competition policy across countries and across regional economic communities in Africa. The existence of these competition laws and institutions means that the CFTA competition protocol will not have to start from scratch. Again, such a protocol can build on the acquis. A continental competition protocol will have to rationalize the disparate competition regimes and institutions and address a number of emerging challenges. One such challenge is in the area of the digital economy, and we'll have the opportunity to talk about this later. What should a competition protocol within the AfCFTA address? It should try to enhance competition. It should safeguard gains from the AfCFTA liberalization. It should strengthen Africa's capacity to deal with anti-competitive practices. It should harmonize minimum standards of corporate conduct. There are, at the moment, 3 options for a continental competition regime. You see them on the chart. The first is a supranational AfCFTA competition authority, one that would sit really, it would be an apex organization that would be sitting at the continental level, and other competition regimes will therefore be subservient in a way to this supranational AfCFTA competition authority. Another option is a cooperation framework, and the third one is a sequential approach. These obviously involve a much lesser degree of ambition. To move on, let us consider intellectual property rights, which is the third area of negotiations in the second phase of the negotiations. What is intellectual property rights? Quick definition, IPR include patents, trademarks, copyrights, industrial designs, geographical indications, plant breeder rights, and utility models. They serve as a policy tool to promote investment, innovation, and competition. IPR are territorial, that is, they apply and are enforced within the country in which they were granted. In the area of intellectual property, there is one agreement, one WTO agreement, which is going to be significant for African negotiators. That is the WTO TRIPS agreement, Trade Related Intellectual Property Rights Agreement, an agreement that was signed in 1994. The agreement signals the multilateralization of intellectual property rights. It sets an international minimum standard for every WTO member to comply with. It incorporates substantive provisions of several WIPO treaties, WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and it does not prevent regional trade agreements from providing better treatment to member countries. So the future AFCFTA IPR protocol can very much build on the WTO TRIPS agreement. As we saw for competition regimes as well as for investment agreements, the IP frameworks across Africa are fragmented at various levels. At the continental level, for example, the AU has adopted several instruments, including the Continental Strategy on Geographical Indications in 2017, which again can serve as a benchmark for the negotiations of the IPR protocol. There are two IP organizations, the ARIPO and WAPI, plus various other initiatives that operate at the sub-regional level. The RECs feature IP initiatives varying in the level of ambition. For example, COMESA has adopted a policy on IPR and cultural industries. The EAC has developed IP instruments in several sectors, drawing on the WTO TRIPS agreement. SADC has adopted a plant variety protocol aimed at protecting breeders' rights. At the country level, many countries have their own national IP regimes. 44 African states are also party to the TRIPS agreement. Not only are the IP frameworks across Africa fragmented, when it comes to implementation of whatever IP frameworks are there, implementation remains patchy. WTO member states, and especially the LDCs among these countries, enjoy some degree of flexibility in interpreting TRIPS provisions, which mean that they have not they have not achieved the same degree of commitment as non-LDC countries. So these countries probably will face a bit of a bigger challenge when it comes to a future IP protocol at the level of the continental FTA. So how can we move towards an AFCFTA IPR protocol? First, let us start with to understand the rationale of such a protocol. An effective IP regime at the continental level can help boost intra-African trade and economic integration. The protocol will ensure that the 9 African countries that are currently not WTO members are not unduly discriminated against. The protocol can potentially also make up for the shortcomings of the TRIPS agreement. What are the approaches that can be explored when it comes to negotiating an IPR protocol? There are three options that can be potentially looked into. One, the first are arrangements for regional cooperation and sharing of experiences on IPR. Again, this is not a very, it's a low ambition sort of arrangement. The second one is regional filing system for patents, trademarks, and industrial designs. The third would be unification of laws for members of a regional economic community. So unification of IP laws would represent a higher level of ambition. So obviously, as we go from the first bullet to the third, you can see an increasing level of ambition. However, it needs to be pointed out that a single IP regime for the 55 AU member states may be an over-ambitious target. So I don't think that in phase two of the negotiations, we are looking forward to one single IP regime uh, uh, for for the entire continent. It's very ambitious, uh, but any agreement that would help rationalize and harmonize IP laws on the continent would be a welcome step. Let's talk about e-commerce, which is the fourth and last area of negotiation. E-commerce is very much part of the digital economy, which covers the production and use of digital technologies, goods, and services. Trading in the digital economy occurs through e-commerce, which involves the placing and receiving of orders over computer networks. So obviously, when we talk about e-commerce, the internet is at the very center of e-commerce. Without the internet, you do not have e-commerce, and that raises a number of questions. Some of these will be discussed as we go along. Some of them also we may not have the chance to discuss all of them, but they are very much there in the course in the course manual. So the issue is really how prepared are African countries for e-commerce, or how prepared are they for an e-commerce protocol as an integral part of the AfCFTA agreement? The answer to that question, in large part, will depend on how ready are African countries to adopt the digital economy. How much involved are they in the digital economy? How much internet penetration is there? What about the IT infrastructure? What about the internet infrastructure? How good is it? Obviously, the answer is that across Africa, there is a lot of variation. Some countries are more prepared than others. So that means negotiating a protocol on e commerce may not be quite easy. E-commerce offers many benefits. It allows sellers to reach more customers, even in remote locations and foreign markets. It offers customers a wide variety of products, perhaps at lower prices and greater convenience. So now you can, sit at home, and if you have a good internet connection through your laptop, you can order products online. So you get to see a much larger variety of products. You can surf across different companies, different websites before you decide which product you want to buy. So that gives you also a chance to compare prices, which means whatever you finally decide to buy, you're gonna get it. You're gonna choose the best product, and probably at the best possible price. So in other words, e-commerce gives customers a good price quality trade-off that they may not have with uh, regular regular trade. E-commerce also creates opportunities for entrepreneurship and innovation. Already in many countries, we see how startups are coming up, proposing innovative services, apps on your phone, on your mobile phone. Entire businesses are now being run through apps. For example, food order business in the UK, in other countries, Just Eat, for example, where it's an app that allows you to choose from a variety of restaurants and place an order and have your food delivered to you in a very short period of time. Uber is another example, which is an app. It's based on a mobile application. So all of these are examples of innovative businesses that have been developed on the digital platform. But as I said, when it comes to African countries, there are a number of challenges that we have to uh, uh, that are there that we have to address. First is the fact that access to ICT is uneven across Africa. There's a low level of technological development generally, and there's a lack of digital literacy across African countries. Infrastructure is deficient. That includes unreliable power supply, poor logistics, including also weak internet infrastructure and poor connectivity. And then, obviously, at the level of regulations and policies, there are much to be done. These regulations remain weak. However, African countries are aware of the potential of the digital economy to foster structural transformation, and various strategies and initiatives are therefore underway to harness the benefits of digitalization and e-commerce. One such example recently would be the African Information Society Initiative. In terms of e-commerce policies in Africa, again, there is a lot of variation across countries, across regional economic communities. At the REC level, SADC and COMESA are at the forefront of digital integration. SADC, for example, launched a four-pillar ICT strategy in 2010. COMESA has approved a digital FTA in 2018. ECOWAS and the ECA have no regional e-commerce strategy as such, other than instruments to coordinate their member states' efforts in this particular area. At the national level, Egypt and South Africa are leading the way in the development of e-commerce strategies, but there are many countries that are lagging far behind. And there's a lot of variation across countries. Many countries have adopted the UNCTAD-led e-trade for all initiative, but again, when it comes to implementation, that is where the effort is lacking. Enabling e-commerce in Africa requires policy intervention in three broad areas. First, digital identities of all players involved in an e-commerce transaction. So, meaning you should be able to check who is who and whether the stakeholders involved in a transaction are genuine, bona fide people and customers, clients, dealers. The second area is technology, obviously, and the third, regulatory infrastructure. In all of these areas, there are best practices, including from Africa itself, that can be replicated at the continental level. So again, a future e-commerce protocol can build on achievements. There are achievements, even though they are not, we may not be, we may not know them, but the achievements are there. E-commerce in the WTO. I think it's important we understand e-commerce in the WTO because, again, we can draw on whatever exists already at the level of the WTO. The WTO adopted a comprehensive work program in 1998 to examine all trade issues related to e-commerce. However, we have seen little progress on this work program until the 11th WTO Ministerial Conference, and that was in 2017. At that ministerial conference, members decided to step up efforts on the work program. Uh, One of the decisions that were taken was that a moratorium on customs duties applied to e-commerce transactions uh, was extended until the ministerial conference, the 12th ministerial conference, which would take place in June of this year. At the World Economic Forum Summit in January 2019, that would be last year, 76 WTO members launched a plurilateral negotiation on the trade-related aspects of e-commerce. So this is a plurilateral negotiation, which is not happening, obviously, officially under the auspices of the WTO, but the idea is that a plurilateral agreement, if it comes along, can be integrated into the WTO and extended to other WTO countries, even though they were not among the negotiating countries. In this plurilateral negotiation, the only African country that is participating is Nigeria. So, how do we move towards an e-commerce protocol in the AfCFTA? I think it's important we understand that there is really no consensus at the AU level on integrating e-commerce into the AfCFTA framework. However, the adoption of the AU mandated digital trade and digital economy strategy in January 2019 augurs well for e-commerce. Three options for integrating e-commerce into the continental FTA. One is an e-commerce protocol proper, which obviously would be the most ambitious thing to do. The second would be an African digital economy strategy for e-commerce and related issues. And the third, e-commerce perspectives integrated into existing AU instruments. Obviously, we see that the level of ambition again varies across these three options, with the most ambitious one being the e-commerce protocol proper. Meanwhile, African countries can make themselves more ready for e-commerce